Since we're talking about these control structures, if, else, uh, while, for statements, I'd like to show you something else today about these controlling structures, and so I will rename this one more time and make it version 7 of our demos that we did today. And bring back the original form of the loop, the while loop. Let's try to accomplish the same checking for things just like this inside the while loop. So we say that for some reason, right? For some reason, let's do the same thing. We have a loop controlling variable named count. We check its value in a condition. Then we also have our if statement, right? Our if statement, and our if statement evaluates this comparison with special value and says jump right back to, but this time there is no increment decrement, so we jump right back to the condition, right? So this is, in fact, this is a significant difference between the for loop and the while loop, is that for loop has increment and decrement designated place for that very direct handling of the loop controlling variable. In the while loop, which is absolutely like general purpose loop, there is no place for increment and decrement. In our case, we just happen to be decrementing the variable, but look what happens with the continue. Basically, if I run this program, first of all, let me build this program, and then I run it. Oh, I forgot to rename it. It complains that they cannot find the main function. Okay, now it's fine. So let's try this. So the behavior is like this. This program prints these two messages and then stops responding. So basically, we start with counter set to 5. And we check it, it's non-zero, so we enter the loop. We check it again, it's not 3, so we proceed as far as this, and we say it's non-zero, and we print, and we decrement the counter. So the counter becomes 4, and we continue with the loop. Of course, it's non-zero, we continue. Again, 4 does not equal 3, so we do not continue, we print, right? We print this, and this is the output. And now we decrement the counter again, so it finally becomes 3. With 3, which is non-zero, we enter the loop again, and we say, oh, it equals 3, so we say continue. And continue simply takes us right back to the condition. The condition never changes, it's now forever set to 3. Count is 3, it doesn't change. We say 3, check the 3, yes, it's 3, continue. Again, 3, 3, 3, continue. Nothing changes, so we create an endless loop. You see how with the for statement, the for type of statement, with the loop controlling variable, using continue is absolutely safe because you just simply continue with the next iteration and you clearly do decrementing and incrementing, and you can so it's worry free. free of any kind of worry to continue from the for loop. With the while statement, with continue, if you using it as, you know, loop controlling variable type of loop, it can be a little problematic. So possibly I could do just this. Well, I say, well, you know what? Perhaps I need to remember that in this case, I still need to decrement the counter. So it will work, right? But if I duplicate this minus minus and minus minus over here, this is not a very good style, right? The matter of fact is, as soon as you recognize that your loop is controlled by a variable, you should immediately remember to start using the for loop and not the while loop. It's just an advice, right? It's both the style, but it's also, you know, if you have a situations like this and you have, you know, all the time you use loops like this, just remember to use the for loop. It's a much better approach than the while loop. Let me give you an example of where the while loop is appropriate. Okay, so for instance, as simple as this. Again, so this will be another version of main, and I go right back to the sample. Give you another sample. With the while loop and with the return statement, return this time I will be taking input from the user, because I have my IO stream, which gives me both C out and C in, character output, character input. Let me try to enter some strings, so I will bring string header into the view, and I will say I have a string, in fact it's standard string, right? Standard string input, and I want to get this input from the user. Now remember how with input we have two ways to get strings from the user. One way to get input would be std_sin input like this. Right, so this will stop the input as soon as somebody uses white space inside this input. So this will get you one word or token, right? Or name it anything you want, or you know, or part, whatever, right? Word or token. Another example of getting input, text type of input, would say get line. And here we say in, from in, character input, and place it inside the input. This is the way, this is the second way of getting the input. So this time you get the whole line, including spaces. This is the second choice that we have. So now I would like to say this to the user. Of course, this is unfinished loop. I'm still planning what I'd like to write, but this is the plan. So I type enter a word, how about this, enter text, or blank to terminate. Okay, so that's what I tell the user. And once they enter it, which I will do with my sin, um, I can do it like this, right? I can do it like this. And then I say std cout. Once again, you entered a kind of silly echo back input, just to make sure that everything is okay. Right, so this will be printed with a new line, like this, right? So essentially I can create this endless loop and test this. So enter text or blank, get the input, echo back the input, and here, right, and here we can say if input is we can compare strings with blank strings like this. In this case, we can just simply say break, right? So break. Okay. So we say blank to terminate. So we check whether this input is blank, and then we terminate. And of course, we just exit out. In fact, let's tell the user. Sorry, I'm mistyped some of this here. Okay, so we just simply say bye, right? So that we acknowledge that, okay, this is a way to exit. All right, build, run this, something. Oh, extra blank. Okay. Okay, new line constant. I just use some extra of this. Enter blank or terminate. So ABC and then enter by. Everything works, right? So everything works as expected. But then both of these two, and I apologize for just a couple of extra minutes. Both of these forms of input with the input operator or get line return true or false. And I guess in my case, since I want to keep it short, I would say that the condition that we should be using here is this. Instead of just making it an endless loop, we can place our character input device as a condition for our loop. If we ask sin whether it's true or false, it returns true if the state of the input device is good. If there is something wrong with this input device, it will return false. Let me give you a demonstration. For example, so I build this and I run it and I press Control Z. Control Z closes, right? So closes the input stream. Okay, so what happens here is that the Control Z closes the input stream, and you can see what happens is that the next thing that happens is that we exit the loop, right? And we exit the loop gracefully because we attempt to make an input, and instead of giving a normal input, we press Control Z. Control Z switches input into an end of file state, which is no longer a good state. And as soon as we loop back, the sin returns false and we exit. Just remember with these types of loops or inputs, like when you create continuous inputs inside your program, it's very good to have conditions like this to control your loop. And of course, for loop would not be very effective in this situation. For loop is designated for counters and other types of variables that you modify and continue checking. Over here, we simply depend on the input or using user typing blank, right? And then we terminate the loop. So this is a very good example where while loop is appropriately used. This type of code normally is written using the while loop. Of course, to be continued, we haven't finished every part of this presentation here today, but we will continue next week. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.